Being in the field introduces many types of hazards. Understanding hazards and planning for decision-making around hazards will create the basis for a safe field environment. Hazard and risk are different but intertwined concepts. Let's recall. Hazard is a potential source of harm. Hazards exist regardless of our presence in the environment. Risk is the likelihood of harm due to exposure to the hazard. So risk is a result of our interaction with the hazard. Mitigating the risk or the exposure to hazards leads to a safe working environment. Risk mitigation can be through preparation, for example, wearing long pants and high boots where poisonous snakes might be present, actions like interrupting a sexist comment, or decisions, for example, ending a field day early when thunderstorms begin. To set a team up for success, we need to be equally concerned with emotional and psychological hazards as with physical hazards, and in some cases, one can lead to the other. Physical hazards tend to be more visible and therefore are more readily considered. Emotional and psychological hazards tend to be subtler and may go unnoticed, so it's vital that we attend to both. What does safety look like in a scientific work environment? Lab or office environments are working spaces that are relatively well controlled, and so hazards are typically well defined, such as the danger of certain chemicals being used in a wet lab or the potential of injuring fingers with a rock crusher. So risks can be mostly predictable. In lab settings, rules or safety protocols can target hazards, mitigate the risk, and then keep the team safe. In contrast, in field working environments, environmental and social dynamics are continually changing. For example, weather or terrain or group dynamics. This means that identifying hazards and mitigating risk of those hazards is an ever-evolving challenge. In order to mitigate risk, we have to be able to identify and categorize hazards. Most people think of hazards as something physical that presents danger or harm, like fire, wild animals, and storms. This is a good place to start, but hazard identification in field settings is more nuanced than that. Broadly, we talk about two categories of hazards. Objective hazards. These include the physical examples I just mentioned, among many others. Objective hazards depend on your environmental setting and your field work type. Consider the diversity of hazards you might encounter if you work in the alpine compared to in the rainforest, in the heat versus the cold, or on boats and helicopters compared to on foot. Practically speaking, the process of objective hazard identification is ongoing throughout the duration of field work. Hazards are likely to change as you move through different environments, times of day, and weather patterns. Subjective hazards are more nuanced but no less important than objective ones. They may not be as widely considered or discussed because they result from a person's interaction with an activity, an environment, or a group, and this can make them less clear-cut or obvious. This can include an individual's level of fatigue, distraction, discomfort, or overconfidence in a given terrain, time stress, pressure to achieve a goal, or interpersonal interactions like power dynamics. Subjective hazards are unique to each team because they depend on the interplay of the people and their specific skills, their physical and mental constitutions, experiences, and their limitations. Let's pause for a minute and contextualize subjective and objective hazards in terms of your lived experience. Picture a past or future fieldwork setting and identify two objective and two subjective hazards relevant to that field site. Take a minute to jot those down. As a field team member, it's important to consider the gamut of hazards that your group may be exposed to, and that awareness ideally starts with a group discussion before leaving for the field. As active followers, once in the field, everyone's responsible for staying aware of changeable situations that introduce new and evolving risks to the group. This is an ongoing leadership role for every team member, and you'll hear more about that in Module 2. Pay special attention in identifying both subjective and objective hazards at play that may compound each other. Oftentimes, this is when incidents occur. For example, consider the heightened risk of navigating a steep slope with cold wind and rain moving in while your teammate is feeling out of their comfort zone in that environment. Or if a midnight storm damages a tent, forcing shared emergency sleeping quarters between a harassment perpetrator and a victim. As you can imagine, you're not optimally positioned to overcome a challenging situation involving objective hazards while individuals are feeling personally stressed or threatened, or when friction between teammates impinges upon their communication and their willingness to work together. This is a time when you want to be very deliberate in your awareness of both objective and subjective hazards. Verbalizing or sharing hazards amongst your group members, either on the fly or in a debrief, can increase awareness and encourage intentional, proactive risk mitigation. In this lesson, we introduced the concepts of hazard and risk and highlighted two different types of hazards that are important to be aware of in the field: objective and subjective hazards. Moving forward with these concepts, we'll look at how they interface with group processes to mitigate risk and maintain safety.